Hello, my name is Bill Bolte. I am from Central City. I'm with the Mariah County Historical Museum. I've been dowsing trails probably since 1997. I got interested when the Mormon reenactment came down through Columbus. And I learned that you could douse trails besides water lines, graves, cemeteries, that kind of thing. So I got interested in it. Once I got started, I couldn't quit. So the first slide here is what you're going to see down the road here, the ruts that are out in the prairie today. You'll still see them yet. These are the things that can be used for dowsing. You see the rods, and these rods here are what I use. You hold them in your hands, and when you come across the grave or trail, they cross, and once you get past it, they will back open again. So that's what I use. Don't ask me how to explain how it works. It's got something to do with magnetism in the earth. What's funny though is the rods are not magnetic, but they still will find the trails, the graves, etc. Also, you can use the watch fob. It'll swing which way the trail is, or the grave. You can use a pair of pliers. You hold them and they will turn down. It's like using the willow stick. That's a Y shape. So that's what some people use. Some people use a pencil on a string or a bottle of water that they can get over the trail or a water vein, and it will spin for them. We used to call it witching, but that kind of sounds a little morbid anymore, so I call it dowsing. These are some of the things that can be found on the trail. This is a stone here that the Pawnee or some of the Indians would have used for a grinding stone. It would have been like a mortar and a pestle. There's horseshoes, ox shoes. The long rod you see here is a gun barrel, and that was found along the Mormon Trail along the Platte River between Chapman and Central City. Here we have a full map of Merrick and partial Hamilton County and partial of Nance County. The trail all started from the east and went to the west. That's the way most of the people were going back in the day. Most of the trails that were really started were started by trappers, fur bearers, explorers, people that were interested in going out west, look things over. Most of the trails hit the Loop River from Columbus, or by Columbus, and there they took the Loop River and followed it to the north because it was so hard to cross the loop there by Columbus until they got a ferry built back in 1858. So one of the first trails that we came through here with the wagons would have been with the Mormons in 1847. And you can see that up here on the top right. The trail comes out of Genoa. Genoa was a way station later on to resupply some of the wagon trains that went through. You see the black line that comes down to the Platte River. That was the military trail that came from Fort Carney. It was used when there was uprisings with the Sioux and the Pawnee. It's not shown on the map here, but on the very right, after the reservation was established in 1858, the trail had to be moved. So before the ferry was built at Columbus, they built a ferry there on the east side of Columbus, and they went straight south into the Platte River. The Platte River became known as the Great Platte River Road because all trails are going to end up on the Platte River going west, except for those that start on the south side, and they don't hit the Platte River until maybe out at Fort Carney. So the first trail, the black line that we see up here, goes west till about 3 miles east of Fullerton. This would have been the same part of the trail that Brigham Young would have used when he made his first pioneer trek in 1847. He crossed just before he got to the Big Bend in the Loup River. The Loup makes a big jog, and from there he crossed it. He went south at an angle. He followed the south side of the Loup River until about 3 or 4 miles east of Palmer. Then he went south down towards the Platte River. Later on, more people came. They did not follow his route, but they cut across through the hills. And with the black line here, you will see that the trail that they used. When they got down south and west of Fullerton, they split. The trail one went right straight south, the other one angled off to west of Chapman. The one that split was the mostly used trail of those two. At the junction where these two split, there are 3 Mormon graves. They will douse there today yet. So that's where the Mormons came. And this one here that goes south come out by the Lone Tree west of Central City. These are the some of the diaries that were written, that were used. Merle Mattis used it to do his book on the Great Platte River Road. They talk about passing the 1846 village site southwest of Columbus, and then going to the Platte River. This is the trail. You can see where they split, going south. And before they got to this trail, they would have crossed Plum Creek, Council Creek, and then they would have came out. This would have been Plum Creek where the slide is now. Here is where they would have crossed the Loup River. It's all farm ground now, but this will all douse from where they left the main trail, going south to the Loup River and then across it. Once they got across the Loup River, this is the trail then that went to the southwest. And you can see here where it did split. The 3 graves are on this junction point right here. And then when they got farther south, going through the hills, this is the trails, the ruts that are still there today yet in the pasture. Hopefully they'll never get plowed under, but this was taken back in 2011 when there was the drought, and you can see the ruts very plainly. These are side views right here. Here's another one that's a kind of a slide view. And then this one here. This part of the trail went to Central City, west of Central City by the Lone Tree. On this particular slide here, you'll see some of my points that I made with my GPS. You see a couple lines up here, they're in blue. You have to be careful when dowsing because, like I said, you can douse for water, and that's where these lines are. They're water lines, I'm sure. I don't know what else they would be that would douse out in the middle of nowhere. Here on the middle trail here, you'll see where it ends up at the Lone Tree. The Lone Tree today stands about a half a mile east of here. Where the trail hits the Platte River, this I'm sure is where the tree stood back in the 1830s, 40s, 50s when it was still standing. One of the notes that I have is that the trail was about 15 rods east of the Lone Tree stage station, and this would make it just about right where it's at. So I don't think where the Lone Tree is at today is the right spot that it should be in. Here we go back. That's where the first trails would have went, and I don't think it got used all the while. This is a close-up view of where the Lone Tree was, and this is where I should have been talking about the Lone Tree, where it came down next to where the stage station was. So, and then you'll also see down below the Platte River, you'll see where the Oxbow Trail ran through down there, and we'll talk about that one later. But this is where they came, and there actually wasn't much of a trail along the Platte River at the time because there was not wagon route along the Platte River until 1858 when they started using it more. From Fullerton, which is in the top right, this is the upper crossing. They followed on the north side of the river because the lower crossing did not work out for them. I think because of the big bend, the water slowed down, it came around the curve, and it was probably too much quicksand for them. So it was not a good place to cross, and they decided they're going to keep on going. So what they've done is they went about 3 miles east of Palmer, and they crossed the river up there. Straight north of Fullerton on the Cedar River, it's a sacred site for the Pawnee. They're one of the 5 sites that they have. I want to mention them as we go along as much as we can. The other one is over by Fremont. But anyway, we're going down this river here, this side of the river. There's a buffalo jump here on one of the high cliffs that the landowner pointed out to me. And we get down here to which is called Mare Creek. Mare Creek is one of the creeks they had to cross, and this is on the east side. You can see the big swale that they left here. This is on the west side of Mare Creek, and you see the big swale again where they left, going to the west. This particular slide here is they're looking east. This is by Horse Creek. They came down this particular hill here, but on top of this hill was a village site of the Pawnee. There were estimated about 3,000 people that were on this village site when they came through here. Today you can still find burnt earth artifacts that are from that village. I don't know if they must have drove through the village, if the Pawnee were okay with that, but anyway, the trail does go through the whole site. When the ground was broke up for farming, they found a lot of metal objects, especially hoes. They were all put in a barn, and later on that was all buried. So somewhere out there is a pile of tools that the Pawnee would have been using. This is where they would have crossed at Horse Creek. This is one of the hills that they had to climb, and you can see the big ruts through there. Some of it has been eroded, of course, but this is just another part of the Horse Creek on the west side where they came back out of it. There were 3 creeks there. One was Horse Creek, one was Mare Creek, and then of course the middle one was a smaller one. They called it Colt Creek, which I thought was interesting. Okay, we're over to the crossing where they went south, and the trail cut across right before they got to Cottonwood Creek. Cottonwood Creek was another site of Pawnee Village. This is on the south side of the Loop River where they came up out of the valley and then went straight south towards Chapman, and we'll see where they end up at Chapman. On this particular slide, this is about 2 miles east of Palmer, just east of where the Limerick hatchery site used to be. And you can still see these ruts out here in the pasture. This is where they're going up over the sand hills east of Palmer, coming back down towards Chapman. This is along Moores Creek. I don't know if that particular ruts that are there were made back by the trail, but it matches where they came across. See where they came across, and you see down here where the 3 lines are. It must have been, it was wet ground, and evidently they had to move over 2 or 3 times to keep on going. Also, I read were notes that the first Fort Carney Omaha trail used this north side and came down this particular trail. Right here to the left of the trail, right south of the river, you'll see a short black line. This short black line, according to the diaries I have read, I think will take me to Alda. I have not had time to finish this one out, but I'm thinking that's where it'll end up, is at Alda. Here are some of the notes that they took about Prairie Creek. the crossings and everything. And here we see the trail where the left black line is the trail that we're on right now. The right one here is the one that came from the lower crossing. This is this one that is only like 2 wagon wheels wide, so I'm thinking it wasn't used very much. Just south of where Highway 30 is here is the Laurel Cemetery, a historical cemetery. Don't have a lot of information on it except that they tried to plow it up and there was a big fight to save it. Most of the graves that I understand were there are taken out and moved somewhere else. There are 2 tombstones left out there from 2 young boys. Okay, some of the points of interest out here is you see the pink sticker on here. There are 3 graves out here in this pasture, just to the north of the sticker. Those 3 graves used to have flowers on them, and nobody knows who they were, who put the flowers on them or not. Another point of interest is their Augie Retzloff's great-grandfather came over from Germany. He was quite old at the time, and they built a sod barn, sod house, which you can still see the walls out in the prairie yet. But he knew it was about time was up that he didn't want to be buried there because of the high water table. So he paid a guy $2 to be buried on a hill about a mile north of there. So also there's a sod house and a sod church that you can still see. Where the sod house was is used to have a moat around it. That was the pen to keep the hogs in. Also, just to the east of where we crossed is Elk Creek. Elk Creek is where the 2 young boys, Tram and Gotch, were murdered by, we think, by the Indians anyway. Their dads were cutting wood across the river. When they came back, they found them laying in the tent, dead. Here on the very left, it's not shown on the map, that's where Ludington's Ferry was. Ludington had a ferry that started in 1877. It was started because the businessmen of Central City wanted to have business from the north side of the river. So they asked Mr. Ludington to put a ferry up. They would supply the pulleys and the cables, which they did. This is the site of the Ludington Ferry. This would have probably been where the house sat. You can see the knoll, the knob. There's a book on the Ludington Ferry that talks about it. A lot of history there. This, you see, is one of the trails that went over to the Ludington Ferry. This is another one that was just shows up a little better because of the shadows on it. The Ludington Ferry is the north trail, the north black line that goes towards Fullerton. This particular slide here is the line that goes across here is the Ludington Ferry Trail in the prairie of Kilday's pasture. Mr. Ludington had another ferry, and this is over just to the east of Fullerton, about 2 miles. You can see the docking point. That's still there yet on the north side of the river. This is one of the pictures. This is the other picture on that side. Because the water was not very good there, Mr. Ludington had the ferry sold and moved upstream. He sold it to Jack Whitney, which is this narrow strip of water here, and Mr. Whitney ran it from then on until there were highways to bridge the river. One of the interesting things about the Jack Whitney ferry is that one time the circus was coming through, they didn't have enough room for the elephant, and they thought maybe that he was too big for the ferry anyway. So they was going to make him walk across the river, but once he got in the water, he wasn't get back out again. So they had a terrible time trying to get him back out. So the ferries on the east side of Fullerton were called the Black Mariah Ferries. And one of the stories is that Mr. Ludington was running the Black Mariah Ferry. His wife was running the ferry northwest of Palmer. A big rain came up, and he was watching the ferries that washed out from the big river water, and his never did come down that he could see. So he was hoping then everything was okay, and she did. She had her ferry tied up. Okay, that's the other thing about the Ludington Ferry is that a lot of people used it from Jack Whitney going from the south side of the river to the north. They would go to Belgrade to have their grain ground up for flour. So it got used a lot, and the trails will reach on the south side and the north side to back to Ludington Ferry up to Belgrade. Now we're going to go to the Oxbow Trail. First, this is the Pawnee Lookout site south of Clark's. This is where the Pawnees set up on top of the hill. They had a village up there, several different lodges. The lodges have all been excavated by the University of Nebraska, or the Historical Society. But one of the stories is that the Pawnee would set up there and they would watch the wagons come from Columbus, go all the way to Grand Island, which is about 30 miles either way. If they couldn't see the wagons, at least they could follow the dust. Girl Hill is what it's called in English. The Pawnee called it Karuspaka. Whenever there was a buffalo roundup, they sent the kids, the young girls, up on top of this hill. I guess it'd be out of the way or whatever, but this hill is still there today yet. There was a lot of activity on top of that hill. I've been up there, and you can douse spots that, whether there's graves, I don't know, but there's circles up there that somebody was there. The Oxbow Trail would have went by just on the north side between that and the Platte River. This is part of the Oxbow Trail. I call it in Shoup's pasture. This is a piece of the Oxbow Trail north of Hordeville. Also north of Hordeville, there was on the hill there was the Hordeville site where there was burial grounds from the Pawnee. So they were all along that bank, especially on the south side of the river. Here you can see the trail very plain, and I call it in Beck's pasture, which would be west of Hordeville. Here is the trail coming down through towards what we call Fort Biggs. Why it's called Fort, we don't know. It was not actually a fort. The only thing I can figure out is that was when the military came through here and they stopped. It was more of a road ranch on the Oxbow Trail for people going out towards Fort Carney and on west. And also it was more of a freighting trail that started over by Nebraska City. This is a trail where they dump down through the creek over by Rayner's pasture. Here's another one in Rayner's pasture. This particular trail is in Griffith's Prairie, going west. Prairie Plains Resource Institute owns this piece of property, so if you want to be a member of them, you're welcome to go down and see that. If you look real close on this is where the Oxbow Trail passed by. You can see in the middle of this an indentation. This is where a sod house sat at one time. To the right, by the big tree here, is the Indian Trail. The Pawnee Indians, the Winnebagos, the Oto, Missouri, they used this trail when they went out west on their hunts. They followed right next to the river. And a lot of places you can still see the trail where they walked. They walked out as far as Plum Creek. Plum Creek is where they turned south, and Plum Creek is the only creek between Omaha and Lexington that runs into the river from the south, into the Platte River. Here was a dugout at one time in this particular pasture. This is over in the Gustafson pasture, the trail going through there. Here the trail goes up the hill to get to a little higher ground because it was getting low, and this is right north of Dave and Terry Maben's house. Now we're going to leave the Oxbow Trail for a little bit, and we're going to go to the Nebraska City Fort Carney Cutoff Trail. The Nebraska City Fort Carney Cutoff Trail was used to make it shorter from Nebraska City to Fort Carney. Businessmen got together to took a plow. They plowed a straight line from Nebraska City to Fort Carney to make this particular trail, and it saved about 40 miles. Also, it's called the steam engine route. They thought they could take a steam engine and go across the prairie, but the steam engine broke down a few miles outside of Nebraska City, and it never did get fixed because of lack of parts. There's another trail coming down through, these two pictures are in York County. Here we're in Hamilton County. We're along the Beaver Creek. It followed the Beaver Creek till west of Giltner. And this would have been the Millspaw Ranch, and sometimes called the Dirty Shirt Camp. This is a marker for the Deep Well Ranch, which was just north and a little east of Giltner. It was a deep well dug there. They never did run out of water. It was a big station there where a lot of horses were kept. The freighters, they slept overnight there. And the marker itself is not by the ranch, it's along Highway 14, but it points the direction there. Here is the Nebraska City Fort Carney Trail site, and if you've been on South Locust Street going to Doniphan, you will see this particular marker on the west side of the road. I kept trying to figure out where the Nebraska City Fort Carney Trail went because of the marker. The marker is a couple miles off from where the actual junction site is. This is the junction site where the Nebraska City Fort Carney Trail comes up here and hits the Oxbow Trail, and this would have been called the junction site. Also, the Pawnee Indian Trail is right next to where the Oxbow Trail is on the north side of this picture. And the numbers you see are my GPS points. This is just a picture that gives you where the trail come together with my points in relationship to where Locust Street and Grand Island is today. This trail here, I should say that trail there went all the way to Fort Carney. Oxbow Trail wasn't used that much after that. Nebraska City Trail was probably used until about 1867 when the railroads came through. It eliminated a lot of the traffic at that time. Now we're going to go to what is called the Itzkerry Trail. This is an old Indian trail, starts out north of Palmer. This particular tribe of Indians were there between 1200 and 1400 AD. Nobody knew why they were there, why they left, and I don't think anybody knows why they left yet, but they're gone from then on. And these are the GPS points where it followed down to Rock Creek and then on over to the Loup River on the north side, and then crossed in between west of where the Mormons crossed. This is a site where the Itzkerry tribe was camped, and what you see here is just a prairie pasture full of prairie dog holes. That is how the site was discovered. The prairie dogs dug up the arrowheads, the pottery, that kind of stuff. It was farmed until about 1940, and after that it wasn't farmed again. And this site wasn't found until in the 1970s. There's several different sites that are still there yet, and this is on Rock Creek on the south side of it. Rock Creek dumps into the Loup River just a couple miles south of here. This particular site here is where Mr. Bozell from the State Archaeology Department set up a grid to dig one of the sites out, the village lodges. The lodges were there for how long, we don't know what happened to people, but they were burnt. You can find the dirt that they used, all the grass, little clippings are inside the dirt that you're digging up. So the lodges had to be burned. Probably a prairie fire came through. So this is the grid he set up. This is the grid where it got dug out to where the bottom of the floor was. He is spraying the water with, or the floor with water to show where the posts of the particular lodge were. Also note the whipped cream cup, a lot of pottery shards, etc. in it. Along Rock Creek, just south of here, is a limestone embankment. And if you have to look real close, just to the left of the tree, you'll see a kind of a round egg shape. That is a fossilized turtle. Over on the right, look real close, you can see 718. Here is a close-up picture of it. We have no idea what those numbers mean. We know that the natives did not have a alphabet. It could have been a French explorer coming through. When Ludington's had the ferry, they talked about the Texas cattlemen driving cattle up through there, going on to Yankton for the Indians up there for the feed. It may be one of the numbers have eroded off, but the dates do not match anything that I can figure out, and nobody else can really figure it out either. Here you see the trail going through where it left the village site. Over here, it's the trail to the right of the black one that we talked about earlier. That's where they crossed the Loop River. I think you've got to walk across this trail, compact the soil enough times, and maybe it has to be wet when you do it in order to get it magnetized, is what I think. Some people try to tell me it's the iron that came off the wheels when they walked through there. The Indians didn't have wheels back then, none of the trails, and all of them will douse. So I don't know how it works for sure. But some trails are wider than others, depending upon the use of them. When we get down by the Little Blue River, the Oregon Trail, it's over a quarter of a mile wide down there. It's Gary Trail, the trail to the right of the black trail that we're talking about. Here is where we see it coming out just on the east side of Chapman, going to cross the Platte River. One of the reasons that I found this particular trail is up on Highway 92, east of Palmer. Dean Frederickson told me about how his grandma talked about the Indians used to walk by their house all the time. So that got me thinking, why are they walking past their house? Down by Chapman, Mrs. Barbara Ogden told me that when her great-grandmother came over, she was about 7 years old. She lived right north of Chapman, about a mile, and she talked about how the Indians walked past their house all the time. And one time when they came by, they were weeping and wailing. My thoughts are that that was probably when the massacre took place at Trenton, and some came back on the train, some walked, some probably got off at the train at Chapman and walking back to the village site. So that's how what made me think that there's got to be some connection between this. So I started in the middle and went back and forth. While I'm doing this, I run across this map that shows the trail going through Hamilton County. Back in the 1850s, when the surveyors were going through surveying, surveyors were told to mark down any interesting or points that would be out there where they surveyed. Whoever surveyed this did put this map down, not on this particular map, but somebody moved it, and it's within a quarter of a mile of where the trail is that I found. Goes up this hill. This is in Hoosman's pasture. Here you can see some of the swales in the snow that it went through. Here's another picture where it was going south. And right south of here, right west of the Monroe Church, they make a jog around, and that's where a lagoon used to be. The lagoon has been drained now, but they traveled maybe 6 to 10 miles a day. By the time they set up their teepees and took them down, prepared the meal for breakfast, etc., it was all done by the women, so 6 to 10 miles, and usually it was always a stop where the water was somewhere that they stopped at. Those especially going south. Okay, here's the going south. The black line that goes across here where it says Derby Road, that's where the Nebraska City Fort Carney Road went through, crossed over the trail. The trail went on south into Clay County, and you'll see down here in Clay County that there are 2 trails coming from here. We'll talk about the left trail a little bit later, but the right trail is the one that we want to talk about now, because that is the one where the It's Scary would have used. Here is a Google Earth site where they came to a point on the Big Blue River. The trail that we're looking at right now goes on to the right side. The other trail that we'll talk about later is on the left side, and you can just see the pencil marks over here on this side. When we get down towards Dewey's, this is the Google Earth map again. It's about right in the middle where they came across here. The dam is down near the bottom. That's where they crossed the Little Blue River. And these are slides of the ruts or the swales that are still left on this particular trail. This is the south side of the Highway 314 that goes over to Dewey's. This is just another one when the grass was green. You can see in the green that the lines that come through here, the darker shade is the trail. Here's another one that shows the trail with the darker shades of green. This particular green spot here is where the trail crossed Oak Creek. The trail went straight and I followed it straight, but when I got up to the edge of the bank was a sheer drop off. I knew that I lost the trail end because they're not dropping off there. Find out that evidently it was a big washout at sometime later, and they moved to the right. You can see the little line here to the right that they went around the drop off and then went across the Oak Creek there. About a mile south of Oak Creek, this is where they came out of the low ground and went up on the high spot. This is Lake Lovewell in Kansas. This is where they would have crossed approximately in this area. It's not actually on the ramp that's there, but it's very close to it. Farther down in Kansas, this is Plum Creek. You can see the trail that comes walking through here along the creek. Here we are at Brad Eilert's. You can see the trail going through here, going towards the south. At the Brad Eilert place, this kiln was there. I had to take a picture of it because it's over 100 years old, and they used to make bricks out of it. This is the trail over by, what's the town? Barnard, Kansas, just west of Barnard. This is south and west of Barnard, coming through the hills. It comes down to a creek right below us here. There used to be a campsite here. Articles of arrowheads, etc., have been found. And at one time, a farmer found a skull there. We are down into Rice County, Kansas now. This is the site of where the Quivira Indians were. These were the grass huts that they lived in. This is where Coronado came to look for the city of gold. Never did find it, but he did find these huts, and this is just east of Lyons, Kansas, in Rice County. The particular trail that we're working on goes down to the town called Etzanoa. Etzanoa was a village site that Don Onate attacked back in 1601, and Dr. Blakesley and a young boy found one of the metal balls that were used to attack this Indian site. Once they found that, then they knew that they had the site found in there, have found several different artifacts, lodges. This is where my It's Scary Trail ends up at. When this site was discovered, they figured there was like 20,000 people living there. If they were there in 1600, just 2 years after the site of the Palmer site disappeared, why couldn't have these people moved down here with them? At least they were there probably before or after. Had to be known of it anyway. I lost my slide on that one. Anyway, we'll go back now to the first slide where we went to turn to go south up here on the Big Blue River back in Nebraska, or Clay County. This is the site that's going to go to the southwest, come out of here. This is just on the south side of Highway 74, just west of Pauline, Nebraska. This is a trail that comes across of it. The reason I found this trail is because in John C. Fremont's diary, he put the coordinates down on the south side of the Little Blue River, And I found those coordinates and I found the trail. I was able to backtrack it then back to where it met the Itzkerry Trail, and then it went on south. How come he didn't do it? This is where it went south, and this is the site of the Kitcahaki on the Republican River. The trail is here. You can see the pencil line through here on the Google map. To the left is where the Indian site would have been, the Kitcahakis. Just up here north where the railroad tracks, the road goes through, that's where Pike would have made his pits, because in 1806, when he came through and discovered the site, Malgares, a Spaniard, was there just a week or two before he got there. Malgares had him put up the Spanish flag, and Pike was making him take it down. He was afraid there was going to be war with them, so he made sure that he tried to get it down, but he wanted to protect himself. He dug pits for themselves. There are places that it looks like the pits are still there yet, where it's not been farmed. Another one of the sacred sites is just to the east of here, about 2 miles. This is the sacred site of Pahork, and this particular site stands out all by itself up in the hills. Back to this trail that we're just on right here, that is where I believe in 1720, Don Pedro Villasar came up on this trail, crossed the Platte River just east of Chapman, made his way over towards Columbus, and that's where he was massacred in 1720. In the History magazine, it talks about coming up a trail east of Chapman, and then the Oto and Pawnee got together somehow, and he was massacred. Also, in 1739, the Malay brothers came down this trail from the Great Lakes area, hit the Platte River by Omaha, I'm assuming, and followed this trail on down to the south. So I'm positive that these two trails are historical in that sense. The reason I know this trail is done by the Malay brothers is Dr. Blakeslee used their diary to follow the trail. He come pretty close with it just by reading it, but he's off just a little bit. Also, when Malgares left the trail here and Pike followed it down, he was captured by the Spanish, and he spent some time in jail for a while, or in their confinement anyway. So there's a lot of history that goes way back when. I think one thing I did forget is back up there on the Loop River, where the Itzkerry Trail came south. Stephen Long followed the north side of the Loop River, and he got over to where the Skidoo were. Here at Ludington Ferry, where the home place was, the big hill you see to the left is Indian Hill. That supposedly was where the Skidoo did the sacrifices of the Morning Star. It is a grave site. I do not believe that that is the actual site that they would have buried him on when they put a waterway through just north of this hill, about a mile and a half east. They hit a ceremonial lodge, and we're thinking that that's probably where the site was for the actual Morning Star. The Skidoo Pawnee were at the bottom of this hill, and where it was not farmed, you can still see the round circles from where the teepee sat, where some of the lodges were. So it's still there, but that was probably the grave site, but not necessarily the site where they sacrificed the Morning Star. The Morning Star was a young lady from one of the other tribes that was captured. She was never made known of what her position was in the particular sect until the day that they were to sacrifice her to the Morning Star, and that was to appease the gods for good crops for that particular year. The sacrifice ended approximately 1827. We know that Pelissaro did saved one of the maidens in 1822, but we're not sure that that was the end of it, but it was pretty close anyway. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for watching. I went through it quite fast. Got any questions, you can get a hold of me somewhere through the Merritt County Historical Museum. You may know that we are building a new museum. Hopefully this information will be in that particular museum. Where building is up, doors are coming on, petitions are being put in, and maybe in another year we will be able to be open there. So appreciate your time, and thanks again for watching.